I grew up in the city of Almonte, which is about a 20-minute drive going east from downtown LA. Growing up, it was just myself, my mom, and my sister, who's 5 years older than I am. My mom, I describe her as the hardest working person I've ever met in my life. She worked two jobs just to kind of keep us afloat. She would work a factory job during the week, where she did silk screening, where she would paint the brands on whether it's like a nail polish bottle or a chili bottle or anything like that. She did that. And a weekend she worked at a fast food restaurant. And my sister, who's 5 years older than I am, she's the coolest person to this day that I've ever met. She was a cool older sister, introduced me to some really cool music at a very young age. And she was someone I looked up to. It was just the three of us because my dad was incarcerated when I was 3, so I never really had an opportunity to meet him. I only have two pictures of me and him. One is of, I must have been probably a newborn because he's holding me in his arms, and another one where I must have just gone back from Disneyland because I have the little Mickey Mouse ears and I have a big smiling, smile on my face. So those are the only two memories I have of him. My sister knew him a little bit more just because she's 5 years older, so she had a little bit more experience with him, but I never really knew him. The way my mom described him is he was always great to her, to us. He was a good person, but he made a lot of bad decisions. In our apartment building across the street was a fast food restaurant. And when I was 3, he was into substance abuse, and he had a lot of anger issues. Story goes that he went across the street to get something to eat. He got into some kind of altercation there. He was high. He goes back across the street to the apartment, grabs a handgun, goes back across the street, starts shooting up the place. So that's how he went to jail. They gave him 30 years. So I never talked to him. So his absence in my life impacted me differently as I was growing up. I knew very little about my dad. And I think it's because my mom only wanted to highlight the good things about him and not so much the bad things, the anger issues, the substance abuse. Plus, it's something you don't really talk about in the household because you don't want family business to get out, all the bad stuff. You don't want people to find out what's going on inside the household. So I knew that he was a very angry person from some of the stories that I would hear. His absence impacted me differently when I was growing up. At one point, I was very angry at him. When I got a little bit older, middle school, high school, I was angry because that's when I started realizing how could you really make such a dumb decision and in a way abandon your family? Because I would never do that. I could never do that. But he did. Yes, he was under the influence of a drug. Yes, he had anger issues. But that's still not justifiable. I mean, he, in a sense, tried to kill someone. And he took it there in an instant. So he made that conscious decision to do that. And I remember thinking, how could you why would you do that? Had you not done that, you would have been in my life. You would have been a citizen by now. We could have had this great relationship, but you chose not to. Plus also being around my mom and seeing how hard she worked just to, keep us fed and have a roof over our head. She sacrificed a lot. I blamed him for that. I blame him because I would think if you were here, she wouldn't have to work as hard. So that anger is something the anger towards my dad is something I carried with me. And then at times I would be dismissive about it. I'd be, he was never in my life. I don't really need him. My mom was my mom and my dad. But over time, especially as a young man, it really impacts you and it hits you hard. You don't talk about it, but it does. It does. Because there's certain things that a father could only teach their son when they're growing up. How to shave. How to little things like that. That, yeah, a mom can be a substitute and she could do a good job, but it's not the same. You know, you grow up not having any confidence. I was very just anti-authority, questioning my teachers, questioning my principals and the counselors because I must have been acting out for attention or wanting something more. And that's when I really I started feeling a sense of anger towards him because I started witnessing how hard my mom was working and the conditions that we were living in and what little we had. And I started really blaming him a lot for that. Because in my mind, I would think, well, if both my parents were here to support me, life would be a lot easier and a lot better. So that's when I really kind of turned on him in my head. Growing up, we never had an opportunity to visit him. It's very difficult to visit a parent that's incarcerated. He was in prison up north. We're in Southern California. We didn't have a car. We couldn't take multiple buses to go up north. So that was a big barrier to us even getting to build a relationship with him. So we never did, which is why there was no communication between the both of us. When I was really young, I had a reoccurring dream that started when I was really, really young up until I was probably like in middle school where I felt like Kevin in Home Alone where the entire family's running around, just running errands, and the little boy is just walking to the house and he just kind of wants some attention, and all of a sudden everybody kind of leaves. That's how I felt. And it was this vivid, recurring dream that I had. And even at that age, I felt it was because of my father being absent in my life. It's something that impacted me hard growing up, but through a lot of exercises and mindfulness, and I've learned to now cope with it. I no longer have that hate and that frustration with my father. He did the best that he could, and and because of the situation that I was in growing up, I am now in other situations that are positive. I'm now a productive member of society where I've worked with a lot of great people and smart people and amazing people, and I can now give back in some capacity to other teenagers who have been impacted, who are probably feeling like I felt many years ago, and I can share my stories with them, and hopefully they can find some hope in that, to know that they're not alone. Because when you're dealing with an incarcerated parent or a loved one, you feel like you're alone.